Welcome back, friends. So Karen and Ted's journey began 41 years ago, and a little plus, in a college station, a college town here in Texas. And we had the great grace of preparing for marriage at St. Mary's Student Center. Um, one was at Father Palermo, who was pastor at the time, and it was what I will call the dark ages of Catholicism. We married in 81. John Paul II was 78. The Catechism and all his, his body of work is just isn't there yet. I mean, it's there, and as a professor in his Polish universities, but in terms of encyclicals and that sort of thing, not there yet. So, us being very young, we didn't have enough craftiness to overthink the good ideas people told us, and we would kind of grab them. So one of the good ideas that came across our path was that great marriages do not happen, they take work. And either you're working on your divorce or you're working on your marriage.
Wow.
And that appeals to Ted and Karen's way of thinking. Oh, okay, so real young, and we want to be working on our marriage. And that meant in this setting, we became involved with Marriage Encounter. And we also did marriage prep at the student center, because we thought, you learn what you teach. So if we teach on marriage, we're going to learn it. So that would help us that way. And then Marriage Encounter would be surrounded by, those who were striving to do good things. And that turned out to be wonderful. We got education on communication techniques, especially dialoguing, which I've used, and we can talk about later. But even, a loved one. So a recent loved one had a profound loss come into this young person's life. And I explained the process of dialoguing, and the partner in question is God. So doing a 10 and 10, frame your question with our dear Lord. You write it just as if it's real and actual there, and you listen to his speaking into your heart. And it turned out to be very, very, very powerful for that individual, for healing. Love languages, or and then having small faith community of okay, how is this going, or how is that going? It did not have, in a sense, I always called it the third rail in Marriage Encounter, which would be birth control. You can talk about everything and anything under the sun, which is great, but artificial birth control was not one of those things. But and then in a different cities when we moved, and I think that's one of the first places we found Sarah, is we had our dessert group. So couples would take turn presenting on aspects of the faith, not necessarily marriage, and we would always have a decadent dessert.
Yes.
I think to remember.
I remember gaining 15 pounds that year, Karen. No,
oh man, they were good pounds, you know it.
Yeah, they were good pounds, all worth the effort.
And then Teams of Our Lady, that was another expression of small groups, a little bit of catechesis, a little bit of fellowship, good food. And then now we're in San Antonio. We had the opportunity to do Covenant of Love, which is outreach out of
Mhm.
the Alexander House. Um,
Mhm.
and then it seems in our later years here, those small, we still will have small groups, but even, and of course, we're just now coming out of COVID. Um, so that was an impact as well. But we have seemed to find
Mhm.
ourselves more in a leading um, volunteering aspect and less of these small groups. And I'll be the first, I do miss it, but I don't know, maybe if it's just a season of life thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say, I think it's also just a bit of the culture. And, those are things that we always have to be willing to, I always say to friends, you can't make people come, but you can fail to invite. So it has to be an element where, I mean, those early venues, um, somebody invited, somebody created a place where they could take place, and I think that people are emerging from a cocoon again, and they're kind of looking for they're looking for a flower to land on, right? I mean, and we really need to be prepared for those things. And I think that right now too, and I don't want to get, weighed down into the weeds of politics, but I think that this quote unquote synod on synodality has been a facsimile of the very small groups that you're talking about. They've been an artificial substitute, for real communication, because they're not they don't appear to me to be true fruits of the spirit, but rather um, once again a taking of something that they're trying to evoke something that isn't authentically there. And it's really in the smallnesses. It's really in the Davids, right? Our Satan is always overlooking these small groups because he thinks that there is something that can be brought about in a more grandiose style. And yet, really, like you said, I think back to those dessert groups, and as a result of those, because you were up in Maryland, I started the faith and family groups by us, where we would get together and we would read the encyclicals of John Paul, mostly because all of us, having grown up in the 70s, were children of an absolute 100% lack of catechesis. You were saying, Julia, that you didn't really even have any idea what marriage was about. And that's so true. I mean, we really didn't. Our formation of relationships were based on, Charlie's Angels and the 1970s and the early 80s sitcoms. Every once in a while, there would be something that would be worth watching, and otherwise it was just the destruction of the concept of marriage and the human person. And so we just felt at that point that we did not want to put ourselves in the position where our children would grow up with such a dearth of information. And the only way that we felt that we could rectify that was by going to the primary source, because it was obvious to us at that point that the church was heavily filtering. I mean, they basically served us, steak that had been blended in a blender. I mean, at best. I mean, and we just wanted meat. We wanted something hearty to chew on, and we wanted to be able to offer something to our kids. And those were the kind of family groups that, when we were having all of our kids, we probably started those groups when we had one or two children, and by the end many of the families had 9, 10 children. But we were the couples who would go to each other's houses at 2 o'clock in the morning to watch the other kids when the mom went in for labor and delivery, and we were the ones who brought each other meals. And that tangible aspect, I explain it to friends that's the little c sacrament, right? It's the outward sign of an inward grace. It's the outward sign of the inward grace of love that was built up in those communities. Um, and I think that really a mother must be in the home if her children are going to feel that there is a home. And our generation was also really lied to about that. We were the Angeli generation. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man, blah, 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 right? And I think that by a tender mercy on God's part, I I remember when I was graduating from college, I ended up graduating early, and I was telling friends, if I didn't get pregnant, I would go on to graduate school and I would get a graduate degree. But if I had children, I was going to stay home and raise them. And friends were shocked because they thought that I was so smart.
Yeah.
Like, how could you waste yourself, quote unquote? How could you waste yourself? And I think that that was just, to me, like an exclamation point on the narcissism of my generation. That it wasn't, that marriage wasn't about me, that it was about me, that it wasn't about children or my spouse. It was really going to be just about my own personal fulfillment.
Right. And I,
Julie,
yeah.
hold your thought. Hold your thought. We're right at the mark.